Okay. Hi everyone. Good evening. Today's session, we are going to start with another vSphere cluster feature. In our previous session, we talked about the DRS, Distributed Resource Scheduler, and DPM, Distributed Power Management. And today is the session 2 for vSphere cluster features. And we are going to cover on high availability, and we can perform the lab, how the high availability will work. Okay. And before we start, we'll quickly update our checklist. See, if we see the checklist, these are all our vCenter features. So in our previous session, we covered the distributed resource scheduler. This is also one of the cluster feature. So let me make this as a completed. And another one we covered as DPM, distributed power management. This is also comes under the DRS feature. Okay, this is also completed. And SRM, we discussed about high level overview. But in detail, if you want to learn, it will be a separate concept. If you're interested, I will cover at the end of the vSphere session. But the future perspective, site recovery manager is mainly used to recover the entire site. Okay. If you want to learn more on the SRM, let me know in the end of the vSphere concepts. I will again explain separately for SRM. Okay. SRM and also VRA, VRO. Based on your interest, I will continue. And today, within a vSphere cluster features, we are one of the main key feature is high availability. That one we are going to cover. Okay, so let's minimize. We'll see the agenda. So today's agenda mainly focusing on the vSphere HEA. But before we start the HEA architecture, we'll quickly recap our previous discussion. vSphere infrastructure, what is the main IT infrastructure challenges, and what are all the solutions provided by VMware, and also protection at every level, and also that we can review the conceptual diagram and vSphere clusters overview, and then we'll start with the high availability. Within the architecture, we need to main key concept is agent communication. Like previously in our ESXi host communication, we discussed about the host D service for the ESXi host agent, and vCenter we discussed the VPXA virtual center agent service. Similarly, when we enable a HA feature in our cluster, it will create one of the agent that is called FDM, fault domain manager. That agent communication we can discuss. And within a HA, when we enable the HA, there will be a heartbeat communication between our vSphere HA cluster network as well as the cluster data store heartbeats. And we can also verify the what is the main failure scenarios. There is a multiple failure scenarios. The scenarios will be like a either ESX host level or it is on a network level, data store level. This all comes under the failure scenarios, and also VM monitoring option in within a HA cluster, and what is the main protection scenarios. Okay, and finally we'll do the lab. So vSphere infrastructure challenges, normally the organization, any type of organization like a small size, medium, large or X large, any organization, the organization perspective, the issues are common, most common. These are all the most common virtual infrastructure issues like ESXi host down unexpectedly. It causes a production VM down. To avoid this one, we have to enable a vSphere HA feature, and the customer is sometime even if the production VMs are impacted, customer will there is a chance of asking for a penalty due to the business impact. And application owners also require a 100% availability for critical VMs. But remember, high availability is HA feature is providing only the 99.99% availability, but the another feature fault tolerance only have a facility to provide a 100% availability. Okay. And for this feature, the solution is for the scenario high availability and fault tolerance. And when you have any resource crunch or insufficient resources, or if the resources are underutilized during this scenario, we'll use the feature for vSphere DRS DPM. And virtual machines unexpectedly down or any of the disaster recovery plan or business continuity plan will go for a replication and SRM. This vSphere replication and SRM is a VMware official tools, but in the real-time scenario, most of the companies depends on their customer requirement. There, most of the company, based on my previous experience, companies, they may have their individual backup tool. Those backup tools or storage level replication models they will use, or only few companies only they will use the VMware replication and SRM. But most of the companies backup is they are using a third party backup software. Today I will cover the what is the other third party tool backup softwares are available. I will give you a quick overview on the backup software also. And this is a vSphere high level protection. So within this conceptual diagram, if you notice in our components level, we have the high availability using a component level like a NIC teaming, storage multipathing. But when it comes to the ESXi host, for the load balancing and the power underutilized systems, we are using a DRS and DPM. But if you do not have a DRS feature, the only option is we have to perform the migrations manually. But when you enable a cluster DRS, we no need to focus on the manual vMotion. DRS will take care of the automatic migration. But if your resources are less resource, it is underutilized. During that time, if you enable a DPM, whenever the any ESX host is underutilized, it will take care of placing the host into a standby mode to save your ESX host level power. Okay, and for the data store level, if any data store is full, we'll normally use a storage vMotion to migrate the virtual machine files from one data store to another data store. But when it comes to the server level, any one ESXi host is down within a cluster. As per VMware configuration maximum guide, each cluster it supports maximum 96 ESXi host. Suppose in our cluster we have a 4 ESXi host. Even within a 4 ESX host, one host is down. There is some running virtual machine. All the running virtual machine will be down. To avoid that situation, we have to enable a vSphere high availability feature in a cluster. If you ever enable this HA feature, the purpose of HA is whenever the ESXi host is down, all your virtual machines will be migrate and restarted on another ESX. Migrate and restart. That means there is a one single reboot is required during the ESXi host down scenario. Single restart means there is a minimal downtime. Okay, and to avoid the restart also, we should go for a vSphere fault tolerance. This feature I will cover in the next session. So today's session will focus on HA. And the remaining points we are aware, for data protection, we can use either replication or third-party backup solutions. I will give you one example for third-party backup solutions today. And for site recovery manager, we will use SRM. The main end goal for the vSphere is make it possible to reduce the planned downtime, prevent the unplanned downtime, and recover rapidly from outages. Outages can be any kind of outage, like a power outage or some environmental issues, whatever it be. Okay, we should be ready with the protection at every level: hardware level, server level, virtual machine level, data store level, data level, and also the entire site level. Okay, so now let's talk about one of the third party solution. That solution name is Veeam. Veeam is the company name. So Veeam solution is also providing a modern data protection, protecting the VMware anywhere. So in this diagram, they have a multiple options. Let's talk about a from the right to left, we can discuss. So if you see the center of the diagram, it says that Veeam platform. Veeam is the company name, and the Veeam platform have a single platform to protect all workloads. Workloads is nothing but any virtual machine or any application, anything we can call it as a production usage items, we call it as a workloads. Normally a virtual machine or any of the application or anything we can consider as a workload. For example, if you can see the physical in the right side below, physical, within a physical environment, we have a multiple favors of operating systems. Suppose if your physical server is running with Windows operating system, we can use the Veeam software to take the physical server backup. And similarly for Linux operating systems, Macintosh operating system, AIX operating system, and also the Solaris operating system. So all these flavors, the Veeam is supported to take the backup from the physical server. But our main focus is vSphere platform. So vSphere is a virtual platform. If you see the top of the virtual environment, within a virtual environment, we have a four popular virtualization software vendors, but compared to Hyper-V, Nutanix AHV, Red Hat virtualization, current marketing leading provider is VMware vSphere. Within a server virtualization, the leader of the current market is vSphere, only the number one product every time, almost since the 2000s onwards until almost close to 10 plus years. VMware only the leading as of today also. After the VMware, other second rank will be like a Microsoft Hyper-V, same like a ESXi hypervisor. Hyper-V also acts like a hypervisor, and it will also allows you to create a multiple virtual machines. And Nutanix also company name. Nutanix also have a AHV. This is like a AHV is like a, our ESXi. AHV full form is Acropolis Hypervisor. Okay, the name itself hypervisor, but they introduced a new name, Acropolis. A means Acropolis. But VMware vSphere is like a ESXi, Elastic SkyX, and we also have a vCenter. Elastic SkyX ESX for a type 1 hypervisor, and vCenter is a to manage multiple ESX hosts. And same way, similarly, in our Microsoft Hyper-V also, for single ESXi, same like single ESXi, we have a single Hyper-V host. If you want to manage multiple Hyper-V hosts, the same like our vCenter, in our Microsoft also, we have a tool name, the tool name called SCVMM. SCVMM means System Center Virtual Machine Manager. That is also almost all the features similar like a vCenter. Once we are familiar with the vSphere product, complete ESXi and vCenter feature, the only the terminology is different. The concepts are same in a Hyper-V and AHV. And similarly to Red Hat virtualization, the product we can also call it as KVM. KVM also similar to the hypervisor. Okay, and AHV also Acropolis hypervisor. This is like ESXi and similar to vCenter. Even Nutanix also giving the vCenter kind of product name. That product is called Prism Center. Okay, Prism, same like our vCenter, they use the name different name, Prism Central. That is also almost same like a vCenter server. Okay, so later if you're interested, you can just explore the other virtualization product. But today we are just highlighted the vSphere. vSphere, if you want to take your ESXi host virtual machine backup, Veeam is one of the third-party backup solution. It's supported for not only physical, virtual, and it will also support for other platforms also like SaaS. SaaS is nothing but a software as a service. It will support for Microsoft Office 365, Microsoft Teams. Even now we connected our meeting with a Teams. The Teams, whatever the files you store or whatever the conversation you are happening, all the conversation recording data also can be stored in a Veeam backup. Okay, and Salesforce data also we can take backup. And if you see the below, we have unstructured data. Unstructured data like NAS, network attached storage data, and also any of the file server shared folders data also, we can able to take the backup using Veeam platform. And similarly, applications. If you have any project related applications, I highlighted a few critical applications like Microsoft applications like Microsoft SharePoint, Microsoft SQL, Microsoft Project, Visio, so many Microsoft applications. All applications are compatible to take the backup using Veeam platform. And these applications, either you can take the run, you can run these applications on cloud environment, or you can run on your Windows physical server, or you can run on a virtual platform. Wherever you are running this application, the Veeam software is supported. It's a single platform to protect all workloads. Okay, and similarly to the database software, Oracle, SAP HANA, PostgreSQL, Kubernetes. Okay, Kubernetes is like a containers clusters technology. And even it's supported for a cloud environment. Most popular clouds are AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and also the IBM Cloud and Kubernetes. All this also Veeam is supported. And not only the Veeam product, we also have some other third-party tools like Veritas Net Backup, Commvault, and we have a HPE Data Protect. So many backup softwares available in the current market. It's always remember that data protection, taking the backup is subject to be customer's choice. So whatever the backup is customer is following, we should also have an idea how they are taking the backup. But as a vSphere systems engineer, our main responsibility is whatever the virtual machines is running in your vCenter. Suppose, for example, if I connect to our vCenter server, within our vCenter server, it's a home lab, so we are just running only the 4 virtual machine. But suppose in the real-time scenario, even in the tiny organization, minimally 10 years successful and 100 virtual machines. All 100 virtual machine backup should be success on daily basis. Because if we are not sure when the virtual machine may down or when the data will be corrupted, in order to protect our data, we have to take the backup daily. The backup portion also taken care by backup team. But as a vSphere system engineer, our main responsibility is we have to validate our backup reports whether all the virtual machine data backup is completed successfully or not. If there is any failed backups, we need to contact the respective backup team to rerun the backups. Okay, so that this backup portion and some of the any additional concepts are remaining, we can cover at the end of the session. Okay, just remember and make a note, any interested concepts and all we'll cover at the end of the vSphere features. Now let's back to the slide. So this is about the one of the third party tool example. Similarly, we can also use any of the other third party tools. And also this specifically Veeam is supported for a VMware platform and anywhere. And even if you want to test it in your home lab or any of the trial run on the Veeam product, you can just Google type the Veeam. You can just log into the official website. See, when you type in the Google Veeam, you will find the official site Veeam backup and replication. Seems my internet is bit slow. Okay, so finally it's loaded. It is showing some 30-day trial. Even we can download a 30-day trial. Okay, and here also they mentioned clearly any workload, any cloud, any app or any storage. Okay, it's supported for HPE storage also. Okay, and workloads also any workload it's supported. The same points I highlighted there. Okay, so let's escape this option. Yeah, this is a direct site. If you see here, we have a VMware products and solutions. Suppose if we see the solutions here, we can see the HPE Veeam, and also we can see the main solution is VMware plus Veeam. If I select VMware plus Veeam, we can see VMware backup and recovery solution. So we have a 30-day free trial edition. You can download and test it also, how the Veeam backup is work. But normally trial editions are supported maximum of 10 virtual machines backup. If you have more than 10 virtual machines, we have to go procure the license from the Veeam. Okay, and the downloads and all from the same website, we can use the downloads tab to download the software. And even if you see modern protection, protecting VMware anywhere, and here you can notice that this Veeam is trusted by the almost 4 lakhs customers worldwide. So it's also one of the trusted product. And the purpose of this Veeam is it will provide a backup solution, Veeam plus VMware SAN and also Veeam plus VMware Cloud. Okay, and if you just go top and you can see the here downloads option, download, and the same picture only I just captured in our slide. And in our Veeam platform, you can see there is a multiple backup options, backup for public cloud, and also the Veeam backup and solutions for public cloud. Let's look for a VMware backup tool also. This is for Veeam platform. Okay, and we'll go for a individual feature downloads. So here you can see for Microsoft Windows, Mac and Linux. Okay, and this is for cloud. I'm just looking for a VMware download. Maybe let's choose the solution is VMware solution, VMware plus Veeam. Yeah, here is we have direct download option for specifically to the VMware download. Okay, so you can just try to explore and do the backup at your home PC. Okay, let's back to the slide. And vSphere clusters overview. As we know, while creating the new cluster itself, we'll have a 3 features: DRS, HA, and vSAN. So today we are going to enable a HA feature. So when we create a cluster, we can enable one or more cluster features. One feature means you can enable only one DRS, or you can say at a time you can enable a 3 features. So now we are familiar for DRS and vSAN. Today we'll test the high availability. And also we have an option to enable images. So this option will be helpful to maintain all your cluster ESXi hosts maintain a single ESXi image like ESXi 7.0 update 2 or update 3. Okay, and if there any imbalanced versions in our cluster, we can use lifecycle manager to update our ESXi host versions. Okay, now we'll start the high availability vSphere high availability. So let's try to understand the high availability definition first, and then we'll observe the architecture. So this is the icon for a cluster icon. Cluster is nothing but a grouping of multiple ESXi hosts. So vSphere high availability is an high availability solution, is an availability solution that monitors host and migrate and restart virtual machine on another ESXi host within a cluster in case of host failure. Suppose in this diagram, we have ESX1, ESX2 and ESX3. This is our cluster 3 hosts. But all of the sudden ESXi3 is down. So that's why the color is changed to red color. When the ESXi host down or fail, what will happen is whatever VMs are running to virtual machine, it's migrate and restarted on one VM is at ESX2 and another VM at ESX1. So it's automatically migrate and restarted on ESX1 and ESX2. Okay, so that means when we are mentioning the word restart means there is a minimal downtime. So that is the reason HA is a failover mechanism and it provides 99.999 percentage continuous availability for virtual machines. So that means it is a minimal downtime. Okay, and for example, the whatever the diagram is says, the same point I highlighted here. Uh, the highlighted point here is three ESXi hosts on the left side of the following figure have virtual machines under the vSphere HA enabled cluster, and host 3 has been down or failed due to some hardware issue. And vSphere HA identified the host 3 status and its VMs are restarted to ESX1 and ESX2 in the cluster. Okay, that is how the HA is working. And now try to understand the HA architecture with agent communication now. So vSphere high availability architecture, agent communication. So let's try to understand. We have in this time, let's talk about the diagram first. Within the diagram, we have a three ESXi host, ESX1, ESX2, and ESX3. And to manage three ESXi hosts, we require a vCenter server. And within a vCenter server, default vCenter server agent service name is VPXT. VPXT means vCenter agent service. Okay. And to manage the ESXi host, we require a ESX host agent service. ESXi host agent service name is host D. And when we enable a cluster high availability feature, immediately it will start a HA agent service on all our clustered hosts. That HA agent service name is FDM. FDM full form is Fault Domain Manager. Okay. So if you notice in the three SXI host is running with a Fault Domain Manager service, and this Fault Domain Manager agent service, it's a keep on communicated to this its associated host. Okay, so every FDM will communicate to another FDM, and even another FDM is communicated to each FDM. And how it will communicate? It's communication based on the management network. Okay, and using the management network only, all the agent service will communicate. It will establish the communication through all our ESXi host cluster management network. And another key point is within our cluster, when we enable a high availability, always one host is become as a master and remaining two is become as a subordinate. Okay. Sometimes we also call it as either master host or we call it as a primary host. It will automatically make it as a primary host, and remaining host we consider it as a secondary host or slave host, because VMware is keep changing the versions from 6 series to 6.5, 6.7, 6, now 7. We have a 7. Update 1, update 2, and update 3. But in our previous edition 6 series, we call it as a master, and instead of subordinate host, we also call it as a slave host. Any name is same. Okay, don't confuse. The terminology only different, but the concept is same. Within a high availability, when we enable HA in the cluster, every cluster consists of one master host and remaining all considered as a either secondary host or subordinate host. Okay, so always the master will take the decision whenever any ESXi host is down, and the master will immediately send the migrate and restart the virtual machine to another host. But this agent communication usually send the agent communication for every 15 seconds. For example, let's talk about ESX1, and ESX1 unable to send the communication to the another ESX host within 15 seconds, and the second and master host it will wait for another 15 seconds. So even 13-second pass, still there are no communication from the ESX1. Let's say this is one ESX2, ESX3. So from the ESX1, there is no communication is establishing. It will wait for first 15 second, the second 15 second. At the time of third 15 seconds, that means approximately 45 seconds. The master host is decides that the particular ESX host lost the communication, and it's immediately initiate the migration of all these virtual machines to another ESX host, and it will automatically restarted on the second host. Because why it is restarting means it is initially registered and locked on a ESX1. That locking mechanism and releasing from ESX1, it require a restart. So ESX is completely not responding, so it will take care of the ESX host VMs migrating to another host, and it will immediately boot up on the second host. But while booting the ESX host, that only the condition is our data store should be shared data store. And remember, if you want to enable a vSphere cluster features HA DRS, all the conditions and requirements similar to our vMotion conditions. What is the vMotion condition we discussed in our previous session is our ESXi host, all the hosts should run with a same CPU family. The same condition applicable for high availability. And CPU family same means Intel CPU family, and CPU technology should be same. If you are using a CPU technology like a Gold processor, or if you are using a Haswell processor technology, the same technology should maintain on a another ESXi host. Suppose there is a chance of using a different technology processor. During that scenario, we have to enable a cluster EVC mode. EVC mode means enhanced vMotion compatibility mode. If you enable EVC mode also, still it's applicable to enable a high availability. Okay. And also network speed should be minimum 1 Gbps network speed, and we require a shared storage, and all our ESXi hosts should run with a fully qualified domain name. That means we have to create a host IP address and host name in a DNS server. So same like vMotion conditions applicable for high availability and applicable for DRS. Okay. Now let's talk about the description here. When the vSphere HA is enabled in a cluster, the fault domain manager FDM service starts on the host in a cluster. So within a cluster, it will start the same service. Okay, and the vSphere HA cluster is managed by a master host. So within this cluster, we have a master host, and all other hosts are called it as subordinate host, or we call it as a another name is secondary host. And master host also we call it as a primary host. Okay, and fault domain manager services on subordinate host all communicate with FDM on the master host. Okay, always the all communication established through the uh, only the FDM agent service. Through the FDM agent service only it will communicate. Okay, at the networking perspective, it will uses a management network, and host cannot participate in a vSphere HA cluster if they are in a maintenance mode. Suppose if I am doing any maintenance on the ESXi host, if I place the host into maintenance mode, during that time, vSphere HA decides that this host is not participating in a high availability, because there is some maintenance is going on the ESX host level, because it's a planned maintenance. It's not a unexpected down. Okay, and it is in a standby mode or disconnected state. Our vSphere HA decide like it is a cannot participating for HA cluster. Okay. So this is a high level overview of vSphere HA architecture and agent communication. And the main key point is agent service name. Even some of the interviewer may ask what is the vSphere HA agent service. You remember to say HA agent service name is FDM, Fault Domain Manager Service. Okay. Now we are going to talk about the how the network heartbeats and storage heartbeats on a HA architecture. See, in vSphere high availability architecture, let's say within the cluster, we have a 6 ESXi host. If you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, here we have a 6 ESXi host. Normally, every cluster comes with a maximum host of 96. For our easy understanding, I took the example of 6 ESX host. Within the 6 ESX host, as we know, when we enable a vSphere HA, one host is a master, and remaining all are either secondary host or subordinate host. But all these hosts, there will be a two types of heartbeat. One is like a network heartbeat, and another one is a storage heartbeat. Because heartbeat means it every time it keeps sending a agent communication through the network and also the through the data stores layer. Excuse me. And the clusters of ESXi hosts created up to 96 hosts. When HA is enabled, the cluster, one of the host is elected. Elected means it's a kind of chosen as a master, or we call it as a primary. And availability heartbeats occurs through network and storage networks. Two networks it will available, either a normal management network and also a storage level heartbeat. And HA agent communications on the following networks by default. Management network also it will go, or some scenarios if you are using a vSAN, if your vSAN is enabled, it will also use a VMware virtual SAN network as well. VMware virtual SAN means it's related to the storage heartbeat. Okay, and now we'll talk about in detail about what is the network heartbeat importance. See, in vSphere HA architecture, the network heartbeat means the same architecture diagram. We have three SX hosts, one master, two subordinate hosts. And for virtual machine communication, we have one network and another network. That means we have two management network 1 and management network 2. The dotted line refers as a management network 2. And this management network also mainly focus on a network heartbeats. Okay, this is a heartbeat symbols. And the master host send a periodic heartbeats to the subordinate host. In this way, the subordinate host knows that the master host is alive, and the master host knows that subordinate host also alive. It's a vice versa. Even the subordinate host, it will send communication to master, and master will send the communication to subordinate, say hi, hello, how are you, kind of heartbeat it will send from subordinate to master, and master also will send hi, hello, how are you to subordinate. Always both are in a alive state. Okay, at any certain time, if there is no communication, remember it will wait for first 15 seconds, second 15 seconds. At the time of third 15 seconds, the master host decide that the particular subordinate host is lose the communication. So immediately it will initiate a virtual machine migration and restarted on another ESXi host wherever the resources are available. Okay, that is also important. And the data store heartbeats. So if the same diagram, but instead of heartbeat communication through management network, the heartbeat is going through the data store layer. Okay, when a master host cannot communicate with a subordinate host over the management network, the master host uses a data store heartbeat. This is the key point. Sometimes if the master host unable to use the management network to know about the subordinate host status, during this time, our master host use the data store heartbeat communication. The same point highlighted here. Master host cannot communicate with subordinate host over the management network. The management host uses a data store heartbeat to determine the cause. So cause means any subordinate host failure or network partition, network isolation. Network isolation is nothing but a network separation. Sometimes there is a chance of physical network down. So during that time also still our HA should be work. So during that scenario, it instead of network heartbeat, it will depend on a data store heartbeat to identify which ESXi host is down. Okay, so that is importance of data store heartbeat. Okay, now we'll talk about a failover scenarios. See, in our vSphere HA architecture, we have a multiple failure scenarios. The main failure scenarios are most of the time ESXi host failure, or network failure, or data store failure. This is the main three failure scenarios, and each failure scenario I will explain in the following slides. Suppose in the ESXi host failure, the failure condition is sometime master host also may fail, and some scenarios subordinate or secondary host also failed. So suppose if you see the right side diagram, we have a 6 ESXi host, and within the 6 ESXi host, one is master and remaining 5 are the secondary host. So during this scenario, to communicate between all the ESXi hosts, we need a physical switches, and we have a 3 physical switches. Again, all these 3 physical switches communicated to the one central core switch. Okay, so this is called it as a central core switch. Even sometime if this switch is down, the communication will establish through the second switch to core switch. Okay, and also we all the 6 ESX hosts connected to the multiple shared data store. So for our easy understanding, we have a 3 shared data stores here. But sometime instead of 3 data store, any one data store also there is a chance of data store failure. Okay, the maximum possibility for failure scenarios are any master host may down or secondary host may down, or network may fail, or data store may fail. So all these scenarios in detail I explained in the following slides. Okay, this is a high level overview for failover scenarios. And network failover means either a host isolation. Isolation means separated or not communicating. And the data store failure. Data store failure means the data store normally it enabled with a VMCP. VMCP means virtual machine component protection. So this option is enable vSphere HA to detect and respond to the data store access failures. Normally, when we enable VMCP, there will be two types of data store failures. One is a permanent device loss. Permanent device loss. Device is nothing but a to communicate between ESXi host to our storage data store or storage LAN. We are using the main storage device name called HBA, host bus adapter. Sometimes the adapter storage bus adapter may be down. So that is the permanent device loss, because when the hardware is faulty, obviously we cannot resolve the issue until the faulty part is replaced with a new part. Okay, so that is the reason the name itself call it as a permanent device loss, in short form PDL. Okay, and another point is all paths down. If you remember in our storage topic, we discussed about the multi-path storage connection policies. We have a three storage path connection policies. One is fixed, MRU, most recently used, and round robin. It depends on the storage vendor. By default, it may connect with a default path selection policy. But there is a scenario, sometimes it may lose the sum of the paths. That path can be either it is a uh, any of the fixed path, MRU path, or round robin path. Sometimes any path down also it causes a data store failure. That is also one of the HA failure scenario. Okay. Now we'll focus on a individual failures. What is the impact of each failure? If the ESX host master fail, what is the impact? If the subordinate fail, what is the impact? That scenario using the same architecture we'll discuss now. Okay. See, vSphere HA architecture, host failure scenario. So within the host failure scenario, there are two possibilities. So what is the possibility scenarios? If the slave or secondary, any name you can use, if the secondary is not communicating through the management network and storage heartbeat, that is one scenario. Secondary means, let's say normally within a HCI architecture, we have always one master. So one master, remaining five are the secondary host. So there is a chance of any one of the secondary host is not communicating. And another scenario is primary host is not communicating through the management network and storage heartbeats. This is the chance. Okay. And but the present scenario, before we start the failover scenario, this is a healthy vSphere HA cluster and running with one master and five secondary hosts. This is the initial scenario. Okay. There is no failure at present. But all of the sudden, at any certain time, there is no guarantees. All of the sudden, any host may be fail. So the scenario will start with a, if you see the heading, it is a secondary host failure scenario. So secondary host failure, the diagram is same, but if you understand the uh, master host is one master host, and all of the sudden our secondary host is down. So now we'll talk about what is the impact when the secondary host is down. See, if you see that below description, slave is not communicating, and the solution is master declares our secondary host down or dead. If the VMs are restarted and other surviving host in the cluster, this is done by the master. That means master will take care of this secondary down host VMs will be migrate and restarted on another host, any one of the hosts wherever the resources are available. That is the second host or secondary host failure scenario. Okay. Now we'll talk about what will happen if my primary host is failed. So this scenario will talk about a primary master scenario. So suppose all of there is a possibility our primary master also down. So when your primary master is down, what will happen is immediately the communication will establish from agent to master, again a master to agent. It is always agent communication is vice versa. At certain time, our new master is, whenever the master is considered as failed, immediately a new master will be assigned. Okay, so new master elected and resumes the master duties. But how it will resumes the master duties is the key point here is a new master is elected and it reads the protected list file. There is a protected list files and all the VMs listed in the protected list that are not running or restarted on another surveying host, because in this protected list it have a list of what is the previous VMs running on this master. All that list of VMs will be migrate and restarted on another ESXi host wherever we have enough resources. Okay, that is the scenario when master host is down. So okay, immediately the another secondary host will become as a master host. Okay, now we'll talk about a network failure scenarios. So within vSphere HA architecture, there is one of the network failure scenarios, network partition. So network partition means still our architecture is same, HA cluster running with one master and five secondary nodes. But the scenario is all of the sudden, one of our network switch lost the communication to core switch. Okay, so when this is happen, if you see in this diagram, the cluster's network will be partitioned. So partition means if you see here, the two hosts become a communication lost within the network and other four hosts still have a communication to network. But during this time, what will happen is network partition means there is a temporary master will be created during the network partition scenario. This master is only to temporary to safeguard our other host. Okay, the same point I highlighted here. The switch on the left has a lost connectivity. The switch on the left means the left side switch have the lost the connectivity, and this creates two network partition. So during this failure, it prepare a two partition. This is first partition, this is second partition. So since these two hosts previously slaves cannot communicate with other master, even this one cannot communicate to the other master, a new master is elected in a new partition. So immediately new master will be created in a other partition. Okay, so which results in a master in each partition. So we have each partition have a one master. But when the issue is resolved, when the issue resolved means suppose after some time our network is restored, our network connection is back to normal. After that connection is resumed, one of the master will allow one master for entire cluster as it was the case before the network failure. Okay, so second master will create only during the network partition scenario, but once the network connection is resolved, again it will back to the only one master. Okay, this is also one of the important interview question, or you may expect this kind of questions in VMware certification professional exam also. Okay, so what will happen when the network is partitioned or network is lost? When the network connection is lost, there will be a temporary master creation will be established. Okay, but the another master is only for a temporary only until the issue resolved. Okay, so this is about the network partition. And now we'll talk about a host isolation. Sometimes network is okay, but our host will be isolated. Somehow the host is hang or something will happen. So the same point I highlighted here. If you see here, the host is only separated within our six host. Okay, so that master is separated. That means the master also not communicating to all our secondary host. So when the communication is not happening, immediately the new master will be elected. So a master reports a host as partition or isolated. That means separated when when it cannot communicate with the host over the management network. Through our management network, this host somehow they lost the connectivity. Okay, but it can observe the host data store heartbeats, but it is able to access all the data store heartbeats through the heartbeat data store. This is where isolation response setting take effect. So isolation response setting take effect means immediately another master will be created during the host isolation or host separated scenario. Okay, so now we talk about the host failure scenario, network failure scenario. Now we'll talk about a virtual machine component protection. Okay, so if you see the vSphere HA architecture, we have a virtual machine component protection. So virtual machine component protection means it's mainly for a data store layer. So any of the data store path, like either a path down or either any of the device down, HPA device down, during that scenario, it will create a mainly two types of accessibility failures. As discussed, the one is called it as permanent device loss and another one is all paths down. In short form, we call it as a APD. Okay, this will be created also. Okay, so any one type of scenario will causes a data store accessibility issues. Okay, so once the connection is restored, again the it will become as a only one master. Okay, so now another key point in the architecture is virtual machine monitoring. In our DRS, we notice that to maintain or to customize our virtual machines vMotions, we have a two features: virtual machine overrides, and we also have a virtual machine level rules, virtual machine level DRS rules, and host level DRS rules. Similarly, in our HA cluster also, if you want to enable the monitoring for virtual machine layer, still we can enable a virtual machine monitoring within the HA cluster. So the purpose of the VM monitoring is in case of any virtual machine lose the connection in a operating system layer issue or application layer issue, immediately instead of sending, it will also send a alert message and it will also help you to reset the VM automatically. So it will help you to resolve the issue very quickly, or we call it as a proactive resolving. Okay, normally when you receive the alert message, we are going to attend the virtual machine resolving the issue. That is kind of reactive action. But the proactive action means with when it is going to dawn, immediately VMware HCA will identify that issue and it will trying to restart the virtual machine, whether it is a operating system issue or application layer issue, any of the issue. Okay, the same points I highlighted here. Virtual machine monitoring restarts individual VMs if they are VMware tools heartbeats are not received. Suppose if there is no VMware heartbeat tools, heartbeats are not received within a set of time. So it will also set a some time based on the default time like 120 seconds. If there is no heartbeat received, immediately it will reset. Okay, and also it will similarly for application monitoring. Application monitoring also can restart a VM if the heartbeats for an application it is running or not received. Okay, so we can enable these features and configure the sensitivity, how much the speed or how many seconds we want to reset that sensitivity and all we can customize and configure on a vSphere HA monitors non-responsiveness level. Okay, so these options we can verify in our lab. Now we'll talk about a production scenario. Until now, we talk about what is the main failure scenarios in your ESXi host layer, network layer, data store layer. Now, what is the main HA protections? So when we configure vSphere HA, no actions are required to protect new virtual machines. All the virtual machines are automatically protected by vSphere HA, high availability. And HA provides rapid recovery from outages and cost effective high availability for applications running in virtual machine. Why they mention cost effective is normally if the downtime is more than 10 minutes or more than 5 minutes, we have to pay the penalty to the customer based on the service level agreements, SLAs. But if the downtime is very quick, it's rapidly recovered, very quickly recovered. That means the cost also effective. There will be a minimal cost impact only, not a huge cost impact. Okay, and HA protects application availability in several ways, not only in a cluster way, multiple ways we have. So the protection against host failure, VM failure, application failure, data store failure, and network isolation. But whatever the failure scenarios we discussed until now, all these failures, what vSphere HA do is by restarting, suppose in a host failure scenario, by restarting the VMs on another host within a cluster. And suppose virtual machine fail, by restarting the virtual machine when a VMware tools heartbeat is not received within a set time. Normally default time is 120 seconds, but this can be customized. Any time you can set based on the customer's request or recommendation. Okay, and application failure by restarting when an application heartbeat is not received within a set time. And data store accessibility failure by restarting affected VMs on other hosts, but still can access on the data source layer. And network isolation, that means network is connection is lost or network is separated. By restarting VMs, if the host becomes isolated on management or virtual SAN network, this protection is provided even if the network becomes partitions, because during the partition time, immediately it will create a temporary master. Okay, that is important key point. Now we'll talk about what is the main home lab concepts for high availability. See, in our vSphere cluster, we have the high availability labs are mainly for, we can create one cluster now and enable a HA feature. And later we can modify what is the settings we have in a high availability, and we can add the host to the cluster. We already added the host to cluster, but we'll test the HA feature enablement and settings and test the vSphere HA functionality. We can try to power off or try to shut down one ESX host and verify how the virtual machine is migrating to another ESXi host, and view the vSphere HA cluster resource usage. Okay, so we'll perform all this lab one by one. Let's log into our lab system. Let's say if you see in our lab system, we have two clusters. One is Cloud Garage GL, cluster CL, and also we have a production cluster 01. But in this first cluster, there is no ESXi host. See, all the ESXi hosts are 0. It's only temporary cluster I created. And the production cluster, we have how many ESXi hosts? We have if you go to the host tab, you can see totally 4 ESXi hosts. 4 items are available, 4 ESX hosts are added. So within this 4 ESXi hosts, if you want to enable a cluster feature high availability, right click the cluster, go to the edit settings, or the another method is select the cluster, go to the right span. You can click on configure tab. Within a configure tab, you can look for a availability feature. Suppose the availability feature here is we have DRS also turn off state. If you want to enable DRS, just click on edit. So we already familiar with the how to enable a DRS. Why it is not opening? Let me refresh. Okay, now you can click on edit. See, edit the cluster settings. We are just enabling a DRS. So DRS, we are aware of automation level. We have a three types of automations: manual, partial automated, fully automated. Normally during the maintenance activities time, we can use manual or partial automatic. And most of the time, the recommended method for automation level is fully automated. Okay, it is taken care of all the virtual machine vMotions. Okay, automatically. And migration speed also, we have a multiple rating. Default recommendation is, see, the default recommendation is 3. Okay, and predictive DRS also, if you want to enable, you can enable. And virtual machine automation default enable. Okay, and come to the additional options. Additional options, we observe the virtual machine distribution, CPU over commitment, and scalable shares. Scalable shares normally we'll use only in a vSphere with Kubernetes concept. Okay, and power management we discussed. If you want to enable the power management, we can enable, but this feature is only if your hosts are running with under usage. But currently we have only limited 4 years success hosts, so we don't need this feature, but we know the concept how the power management will work. And advanced options, normally advanced options is like a, if you are doing some auditing kind of thing, if you want to validate or modify any of the settings, VMware will provide you some option and value number. During that time, whatever the option VMware given, that key values you can enter and provide that value and click on add, it will add. Okay, but when you want to do modification on advanced option, always contact the VMware technical support team. They will help you to enter which is the relevant option and relevant value. Okay, always follow the VMware official article, or you can contact the technical support team. Okay, now click on OK. So DRS is enabling. See, the status is changed to DRS on. Now, if you want to enable a HA, just right click the cluster. If you go to the right click cluster settings also, it will redirect to same tab. So select the availability and right side, you can click on edit. So when you click on edit, see whatever the failure scenarios we discussed until now, all the failure scenario you can see here, but it's showing in a gray color. Let me click on edit. So when you click on edit, see our cluster settings, production cluster 1, I'm going to enable a vSphere HA. So just turn on this enable button. So when you turn on, you can see failures and responses. So this only we discussed until now. The main, when you enable this option, automatically enable host monitoring option also turn on. And what is the main failure scenarios are failure and response with tab. It refers as a host failure response and response for host isolation, Host is isolation means host separated. And the data store level, we discussed about two options, virtual machine component failure, VMCP. The two failures are permanent data loss or all paths down. These two are PDL, APD. Okay. And we also talk about the VM monitoring. Okay. All these options comes under the failure and responses. And here we'll observe all the options one by one. You can configure vSphere HA response to the failure condition on this cluster. So this configuration, these options are default. If you want to modify, we can modify. The following failure conditions are supported: host isolation, VM component protection. VM component protection means VMCP. This is like a data store with PDL, permanent data loss, or data store with all paths down, APD. And also we have VM and application. See, VM and application means VM monitoring. Okay, so let's try to understand the host failure response scenarios. See, whatever we discussed in the failure response, by default it will restart. Okay, that means when a host failure is detected, virtual machines will be restarted in the other determined by their restart priority. So restart priority default, we can set it as a medium, or if you want to set it as a high priority means very fast reboot. But sometime user may be running with some applications, better always leave it as a default priority. Suppose if you select as low or lowest means the reboot will may take some time. Okay, it will be like a slow reboot. High means high, very highest means very fast reboot, high also fast reboot, but the VMware default setting is medium. Let's leave it default. Suppose any of your customer specifically ask you to change your setting to high or low, then you can change. Okay. And suppose if I select the failure response as disable, that means host monitoring is turn off, vCenter will not respond to the host failures. So it is almost like a disabling the HA. Okay, either you can turn off HA here or you can disable the failure response. Okay, but most of the time we can go with a default restart VMs option. Okay, and the response to the host isolation, even host isolation, if you want to enable, if you enable, what will happen is power off and restart VMs, shut down and restart VMs. Here also host isolation, the best recommend option is restart virtual machine. Either you can choose shutdown restart or power off restart, anything. So any method is okay. And the data store permanent data loss. Here also, if you expand here, you can see multiple options. Disable means no action required, issue events, and power off and restart. Always go with a default recommendation option. And the same way for APD, all paths down. Here also recommendation, power off and restart virtual machine. Okay, any method. This is aggressive means fast reboot. This is a default option. Always keep it as a default option. Okay, and VM monitoring, even VM monitoring disable state, if you want to enable, you can enable the VMware monitoring. If you enable this option, remember that all our virtual machine should up and running with VMware tools. If no VMware tools, immediately it will restart. Okay, so for the time being, I'm just disabling because it's our test lab only. And admission control, this is also one of the important option. Admission control means it is a policy used by vSphere HA to ensure failover capacity within the cluster. So remember, this is the key point, failover capacity. For example, within my cluster, how many ESX hosts we have? ESX 1, 2, 3, 4 ESX. But the host failure cluster tolerates how many host failure it allows. Default host failure is one host failure. Suppose at a time, two hosts fail. That time, if your cluster failover is set to one host means it will vSphere HA will work for a one host failure scenario only. If you want to increase the how many host failure scenario, you can try to increase here the maximum host failure within one cluster. It supports three host failure. Three host failure means, don't confuse with at a time, with at certain point in time, at a time three hosts down also there will be no impact to your production. But it is a very rare case at a time three host time. Most of the time within a cluster one host may only down. Okay, even two hosts down also very rare case. Okay, so if your cluster hosts are more than 4 or more than 10, always you can increase your host failure priority. It will be just to safeguard. See, maximum 1 and less than number is maximum 1 less than number of ESX hosts. Suppose that number, if you want to choose 3 hosts, we have a 4 ESX. Even if you shut down 3 hosts also, there will be enough ESX host to move all the virtual machine. So based on your cluster capacity, you can choose the host failure conditions. But the default host failure, it support for a one host, and you can increase until 3 host failure. Okay, and the define host failure capacity by based on the available cluster percentage, because if your ESXi host 1 is down, we should have enough resource on ESX 2, 3 and 4. Any one host must have enough resources to maintain the host. That resources normally how VMware calculate is always every host should maintain a 20% buffer. That 20% buffer will automatically calculated here. So either if you want to edit these percentages, you can edit or just leave it default. This cluster will take care of automatic buffer mechanism. If there is any less resource in our cluster, HA will trigger a warning message to the vCenter alarms. Okay. And also the percentage degradation, any virtual machine running with the high resource usage also, you will get a warning messages. And heartbeat data store, we already talked about the heartbeat data stores. So heartbeat data store by default it's enable state. See, currently we have shared data store, only one shared data store, and it is mounted host only. Okay, it's mounted to 3 ESXi host. Maybe it's not mounted to ESX4, we'll check and we'll enable for a ESX4 also. And advanced option, see this advanced option and value we can enter only with help of the VMware support team. Okay, just or else by default just leave it blank, no need to do any changes here. Click on OK. So this is how we can configure the HA. See, now let's try to understand the default recent settings. See, when you're trying to enable the HA, configuring HA, try to understand the details tab. It will start a election also. First it will elect one master host and remaining will be secondary host. Master host we also call it as primary ESXi host. See, the HA configuration is in progress. See, HA configuration completed for all our ESX1, ESX2, 3 and 4. Now, if you want to see which is master and which is the uh, secondary host, how we can verify is select the cluster, you can right side, go to the ESXi host tab. When you go to the host tab, you can see we have 4 ESXi hosts, hosts are in connected state, and this warning message safely ignore. And just if you notice here, we have a cluster's name. Our cluster name is production cluster 01 and consumed CPU, consumed memory, you can see the HEA state. HEA state means high availability state. If you notice here, one of the ESX host is elected or selected as a primary and remaining 3 hosts are running as a secondary. So you can use the name either secondary, subordinate or slave host, any naming terminology we can use. Okay. But the current latest 7.0, maybe the VMware is using primary, secondary terminology. Okay, and uptime when we turn on this ESXi host almost the 80 minutes ago. Okay, and the primary host, what is the primary host name is, it is a ESX4. Okay, and remaining ESX 1, 2, 3 are a secondary host. Now, before we test the HA, let's verify the data store, because to enable HA also one of the key condition is our shared data store. Currently we have a 4 local data stores, ESX1 local data store, 2, 3, 4 local data store. We have one iSCSI data store. This iSCSI data store, select the iSCSI, go to the host tab. Oh, it's already selected for a 4 hosts. Okay, 4 hosts are able to detect the shared data store. Even select the ESX4, it's able to detect the 2 data store. Okay, we already meet the conditions. Our ESX host name also fully qualified domain name. We have shared data store. Our network is minimum is 1 Gbps speed. Now we are good to test the high availability. In order to test the high availability, the condition is all our virtual machines should run on a shared data store. If you see our vSphere VRA VM's identity manager, I think it is running on a local hard disk. Local hard disk. So this one we cannot test for HA, and even VRA also running on local hard disk. Yeah, local hard disk. LCM also local hard disk. Because of less disk space on our shared data store, I created in a local data store. But we can able to test with this Windows 10 VM. Let's say this Windows 10 VM, it is running in, I think, shared data store. Yeah, it is running on shared data store. And which host it is running is, it is running on ESX2 demo lab. So that means, suppose if the ESX2 VM is suddenly down, what will happen? This VM will be migrate and restarted on another ESXi host wherever the resources are available. Suppose resources are available means how we can verify is select the cluster, go to the host tab. If you see here, the resources on ESX4 is 35% is consumed, and and memory also 90% consumed. That means resources are very less resource available here. When I restart the ESXi host 2, that virtual machine may be migrate and restarted to either ESX1 or ESX3. Okay, because ESX1 and ESX2 have enough CPU and enough memory. Okay, now we'll try to do the test. Normally, if we want to do the maintenance, we'll select the host and go to the maintenance. That time is like a vMotion only. VM will migrate, live migration only it will happen. But I am planning to shut down the host immediately, like unexpected shutdown. How we can prepare unexpected shutdown is select this ESXi host and connect this host using putty. Let me open the I think it's in the softwares. Yeah. Now connect to the putty session. I'm connecting to the ESX2 because our ESX2 only running with one virtual machine. And this VCLS cluster service VM we can safely ignore because it's a lightweight VM only. That VM we don't need to bother. Or seems to be I'm unable to access the ESX host using SSH. So that means SSH is not enabled. Go to the configure, look for your services and enable SSH. SSH is in a stop state, just start. So SSH is running now. Okay, now you can see vSphere high availability agent also running. But high availability agent, another service name is FDM, Fault Domain Manager. Okay, when we enable HA, all our host is running with a high availability agent service as well as VPXA service. Now let me try to restart the SSH session. Yeah, now SSH is enabled. Root and enter the password. So when I enter the password, we are able to log into the ESX2. Let me increase the font. See, our ESXi2 is connected, and even if you see here, ESXi2 is running with one virtual machine, Windows 1. Now, generally, the manual migration or manual maintenance is we have to do in a maintenance mode. This is the actual format to do the maintenance. But I am doing just for our high availability testing purpose without placing the host into maintenance mode. I'm just restarting right quickly. Now we'll see whether the HA is going to restart our Windows 10 VM to other host or not. Okay, so just reboot is I just type the command reboot. Once we key in the reboot command, just press enter. So within the few seconds, our host will be down. Let's monitor the status. Already entered the reboot command. Yeah, see, you can notice that our putty connection is disconnected. Remote side unexpectedly closed the network connection. Our network connection is lost. Okay, now within few seconds, you can see this virtual machine will be migrate and restarted on another ESXi host. Okay, we'll monitor through recent tasks. But this slowness due to our lab only, because in the production environment it will be very fast. Okay, because our lab all ESX running on a, see, if you see this VM, see, VM is already not there in the ESX2. Where this VM is running now, just go to the VM summary tab. See, it is migrated to ESX1. If you see in this console screen, already virtual machine is restarted. Why it is restarted? Because ESX2 is down. This virtual machine is migrate and restarted on another ESXi host. So resources are available on both ESX1 and ESX3, but it chooses the ESX1. Is it clear? The reboot is in progress. VM is booting up. Okay, so our ESX2 status, if you see the ESX2 status, it is in the not responding state. This is how HA will work. But in our home lab, I just verified with a one virtual machine, not only one VM. Even if your ESX host is running with the 10 virtual machines or more than 10 virtual machines, still the HA functionality is same. Okay, so see, now the host reboot is still, it is now host is back, but our VM is migrate and restarted on ESX1. Okay, this is how high availability works in the backend. And let's see, verify what is the HA master. The master primary is still the ESX4, and our secondary nodes 3 are running. ESX2 we just restarted for HA functionality test. Okay, but the VM is safely restarted on another ESX. Clear? So we verified the how to create cluster, enable HA feature, and we verified the HA setting options when you click on edit. And we know already how to add the ESX to cluster. If you want to add the host, any additional host in future, right click the cluster and you can choose add host. Okay. And test the vSphere functional. We already tested by restarting one ESX host immediately. Normally the restart procedure is we have to place the host into maintenance mode. For example, I will show you that option also. Let's say our ESX1 is running with one VM. If I place this host into the maintenance mode manually, that time it is not a cold migration, it is a hot migration. Hot migration means it uses DRS technique. Suppose right click the ESX01, select maintenance and enter maintenance mode. When I select maintenance mode, what is the message? It clearly says that move the power off and suspended virtual machine to other host. But currently there is no power off VM, only power on VM is there. So this option either tick or untick, no issue. Now click on OK. See, now during this time, it clearly says the warning message. There are one or more powered on virtual machine. This operation will proceed. The virtual machines are powered off and migrated to another host. But this is not a cold migration, it is a hot migration. Quickly open the VM and see the graphical screen. It won't restart. It's still in the live state. And the virtual machine migration completed and the maintenance status is 53% completed. See, ESX3 is in a maintenance mode and the virtual machine safely running on which host? It is running on ESX2. Okay, but during the manual maintenance mode, it uses a DRS technique vMotion. But if your ESX host is suddenly down, unexpectedly network fail or unexpectedly data store fail, we already discussed the failure scenarios. Any of the failure scenario, the only thing is it will migrate and restart it on another ESX host. But we tested with one VM, the same case applicable for if your ESX host running with 100 virtual machines also, same scenario. Okay, that is the importance of high availability. Suppose, just imagine we do not have a high availability feature. When the ESX host down, my host is running with 100 virtual machines, all your 100 virtual machines will be powered off. Until you bring up the ESX host, all your 100 virtual machines still down. But if you have a HA, our downtime impact is very minimal. Within few seconds, immediately it will migrate and restart. That only the downtime is minimal, one reboot time. Okay, the time also save. We are meeting within our SLA. Okay, that is the importance of high availability feature. Even if you want to enable another cluster just for testing, just create a new cluster. Let's say I'm creating a test cluster. Test cluster 01. See, during the cluster enable itself, we have a 3 options. You can enable vSAN, you can enable HA, and also DRS. So earlier sessions, we first discussed about vSAN, and later sessions we discussed DRS. Today we covered the high availability. Now you are familiar with what is the key features of cluster features, vSAN, HA, DRS. Okay. Now click on next, finish. See, the new cluster is created along with production. We have a test cluster. Even if you go to the test cluster, configure tab, availability, all the features are same. When you enable HA, these are all the failures and responses. Host failure scenario and host isolation. Within a data store level, when the VM component production is enabled, two options are available, PDL and APD. Okay, and VM monitoring. And admission control also default is 1. If your cluster is running with more than 30 ESX host and all, that time you can increase your failover capacity. Okay, and heartbeat data store default it will enable for whatever the data store shared data store available, the heartbeat functionality will work automatically. See, use data stores from specified list, complement automatically if needed. Okay, and advanced option is normally during the troubleshooting or audit scenario we need to enter some values. Okay, now click on OK. That is about the high availability feature. So let's back to the slide. We verified the cluster enable, modify, adding the host and HA functionality we tested, and view the HA cluster resource usage. The HA cluster resource usage similar like our DRS. Just select the cluster and you can go to the summary tab and we can see all the HA cluster feature information. When you go to the HA when you go to the HA cluster, so select the production cluster and go to the summary tab. When you go to the summary tab, in the summary tab, we can see data center name, data center 01 and DRS scores. See, if you see the DRS scores, all are in a healthy condition. Normally, if you have a less score 0 to 20 or 20 to 40, it is in a imbalanced situation. Okay, but currently it's in a healthy condition. And even if you can see cluster health status is healthy. Okay, and if you just scroll down, you can see the DRS feature, HA feature. If you see vSphere HA, if I expand here, you can see HA how it is protected, and the CPU resource failover is 34%, and memory reserved is 72%. Always it will reserve the one host resources. Okay, and with the 20% buffer. Okay, and the proactive HA disable, host monitoring enable, VM monitoring is disabled. If you have multiple VMs and multiple ESX hosts, that time we can enable the proactive HA and VM monitor. Okay, this is about the how we can see the vSphere HA resource usage. View the vSphere HA cluster resource usage. That resource usage we can see from a when you select the cluster, go to the summary tab, you can see. You can see the HA summary page, resource usage page, and similarly, you can also see the DRS score information. Okay, and overall, our cluster service health status is healthy. And the custom attributes like this, we can enter the attribute and values, but these values under default one. But sometimes during the troubleshooting scenario, our VMware tech support team may give some advanced options. That time only you can update our advanced option settings, like select the availability, go to the edit and go to the advanced option, these values. Okay, so we generally we no need to enter anything. During troubleshooting scenario only we can enter. And same case for DRS also. DRS also usually will use the default settings, automation and additional options, power management, advanced option only during the troubleshooting scenarios or any audit purpose. If there is any key values you need to maintain as a standard policy, that time you can enter the option and value here. Okay, so that's it for today. We mostly covered the high availability feature. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. If no questions, we can end the session here. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Bye for now.